The world is saved. The living room's dark save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
It's been a great season. No, actually, it's been terrible. The weather out here has been crap. I would give anything to have a magical rod to change it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because the problem is when I went there, I waved the wand of winter and I haven't been back out there yet. So,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, so if you could come unscrew us, that would be neat.
Well, I mean, if you're willing to pay a plane ticket, you know, go ahead and schedule me in for sometime around March, April, you know, when and then I promise you there will be some correlation between my visit and the warm weather.
No, I like this because without a time machine, I have no way to compare that experiment to a different set of procedures. So I will have to assume, like losers on the internet, that it must have worked.
Correlation always proves causation. The world gets wildly more fascinating if you assume that correlation always proves causation.
Oh, so is correlation the effect that causes causation?
So correlation
No,
just means
I'm saying in a universe where correlation and causation are the same thing, is it that the fact that they correlate makes it true that it was a cause, or just that they are the same thing?
Just no, the former, right?
Okay.
So like, yeah, if you can find a correlation, then that therefore in this universe means that the statement that A causes B is true. And the thing is that it doesn't really, you don't really know like which direction the correlation, the causal, you know, thing goes. For example, you know, there are more PS5s in the world now than there have ever been in the past, and life expectancy is higher than it's ever been in the past. Therefore, you know, either PS5s increase life expectancy, or the longer people live, the more PS5s get generated. I don't know which, but one of those two things has to be true.
Yeah. In that universe, I would spend all of my time looking for spurious correlations, because that would then force them into like a fundamental law of the universe, which sounds great.
Yeah.
And not at all dangerous.
We are all of us gods.
Oh God!
Speaking of,
yeah, didn't we play a video game? We played The Legend of Zelda, or Oracle of Seasons, which is, so I'll just do the whole meta, right? So this game came out in May of 2001. It was for the Game Boy Color. It's if you've ever played Zelda, it's Zelda, right? So here's my summary. It is a top-down 2D action puzzle game. You all know what Zelda is by now. You got to save a bunch of MacGuffins in order to have the power to save another MacGuffin, which is usually a human. And in this case, it's like she's kind of a god, I guess. Like you're trying to save her, right? You push blocks, you stab things. There's like a bunch of different items. But what's cool is like
you have to stop Kirkland Brand Ganon from
you're not in Hyrule. You're in like Holodor. Like it still even starts with an H. It's a lot of overlap. What was unique about this game is this was for the Game Boy, and there's another one called Oracle of Ages, and there was a third one called Oracle of Game Cancelled, and that one was going to, because then there was going to be one for each.
The Triforce, yeah.
Right, and then, but you could like link cable them, and there were like passwords you could pass back and forth. So there are 2/3 of a whole Zelda idea that like never has manifested outside of this, unless you count Four Swords. Like you had to play Four Swords as a like linked up with your friends, but I don't know. I think it was a pretty cool idea. They did a smart thing and made sure the game stood alone. So like we only played Oracle of Seasons, but
right, yeah, which is kind of important. It's kind of like, you know, you can play Pokemon Blue and never ever play Red or any of the others. It just means that your Pokedex will be incomplete, but
forever
that's
until your friends make fun of you to death.
Yep. Which, you know, to be fair, the number of times they make fun of me and my closeness to death does have a correlation. So therefore, it just shows that Bard's vicious mockery is actually a real thing, you know?
Yeah. That's not a fantasy spell. That's just a description of teenage male bonding.
Yeah, because it's like a wizard's like, you know, How do you get your spells? Oh, well, I've studied for many years, and I accumulated this knowledge of the universe, and I use it to evoke magic. Sorcerer, how do you cast your spells? Like, well, I have deep ties of like my draconic lineage that I use to evoke magic, given my strong connection to my personality. Bard, how do you create magic? I don't know, man. I was making fun of a goblin one time so hard that he died.
Also, I have a lute. Do you have much of a nostalgia experience for this game? Because mine is like kind of mean.
I don't. The one thing though that I will say during this part of it is I was when I was playing this game, I was getting a feeling of nostalgia, and I'm like, I don't think I've played this, but why does there's a lot of like nostalgia feelings for it. And then I was like, wait a minute, and I went online and I did a little bit of research, and I'm sorry. I'm so
Wait,
very
you
sorry.
did a little bit of research about this game or about the Zelda franchise?
Kind of the Zelda franchise is so the research
you might have cheated it. You might be okay.
So the research that I did, the reason why I was able to justify it is because I'm like, I know that you are going to have to look this up. So I just got the information before you said it just now, which is when was this game released and when was Ocarina of Time released? Because I needed to know which came first. Because I was like, there's a lot of corollaries between these two games. And so this one came after Ocarina of Time.
I mean, it straight up has the Song of Storms in it.
That's what made me go to look it up, because I heard that and I said, I've got to know which came first, the chicken or the egg on this one, because I heard that and I was like, okay. And then, they've got, Lon Lon. They don't have Lon Lon Ranch, but they have Lon Lon something. I forget what it is, like.
Yeah, and she refers to her father when you go and talk to her, who it's him, like it's the Lon Lon guy, like it's, yes.
Yeah, so, there's a lot, and, they constantly refer to like, oh, you have the Triforce symbol on your hand, and I was like, that I think that was established in Ocarina. So anyway, so that was kind of so I got a little bit of a nostalgia bump from Ocarina of Time and how this kind of leaned on its mythology a bit. So that's my nostalgia experience.
No, I think that's what is happening here, because something I forgot to mention is another thing that makes this game and Oracle of Ages unique. These are made by Capcom, right? These weren't made by Nintendo. These were made by Capcom. And Zelda, historically, and now, up to the present day, is something they hold pretty close, just like the Mario franchise, right? Or like Pokemon Company does not let other companies make Pokemon games, right? There's certain properties that companies own that they're like, we make this, we don't trust anybody else to make this. For whatever reason, they let Capcom make what was supposed to be a trilogy, but ended up just being the two games. And if you're Capcom, and you have this incredibly successful source material plus Zelda 2 to draw on, then you have to not screw that up, right? Like, you have a relationship with Nintendo and you need to not screw all of that up. So the music is not even, like their covers, right? Like their Game Boy covers literally they're not homages. It's not like, oh, this is kind of, it is literally like someone just took that and shoved it into however much they could fit onto a Game Boy cartridge. So no, I don't blame you for that, because I think year of release is like, I mean, I always know the year of release because I have to make sure the game is old enough.
Right. Yeah. So, and that was the thing though, is that like, so I needed to know its year of release because it's a Game Boy game. In my mind, I just equated it to a original Game Boy and to Super Mario Land.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of those.
Which is
in my mind, I'm like
90 or 91 or whatever.
Yeah, way earlier. So in my mind, I was like, oh, well, it would have been like, I was more closely thinking that this came out around the time of Link to the Past. Somewhere between Link to the Past and Ocarina is where I assumed this thing had landed. And then I was like, either they really called their shot on this game and Ocarina cribbed a lot of stuff, or it was the thing that makes sense. But anyways, what was your nostalgia experience?
Well, it's the experience you had, but at like when it was new, right? So to me, the first Zelda Game Boy, which I can't believe I'm blanking on the name now, but the other one that started as a port of Link to the Past, and then they were like, no, let's just make it into its whole own game. The game is a perfectly serviceable game. I enjoyed it, but it's not Link to the Past. And when I was a kid, I was too shallow to understand that things can be similar and different, and those differences can be enjoyable. So I was just like, oh, but it's not Link to the Past, right? And then because I didn't have a Game Boy, so all the Game Boy games I played through friends who had Game Boys. And so when Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages came out, I was like, right, still not Link to the Past, though. Still like a little wimpy baby game shoved onto a Game Boy. So I had that kind of like, but it's not my Zelda thing. And that is carried on until fairly recently when we like went back and were actually gave some of these games the time of day. I still don't know if I'm ever going to be able to bring myself to play Spirit Tracks, though, the one that's about trains, because it might be too not Zelda. It just seems too silly. Like, I don't know, go fill out the feedback form if it's awesome and I should totally play it, but like it just seems like even the cover art looks like weird fan art of someone who likes Zelda and also likes trains, because it's just like Link in a little conductor's hat. I don't know, it's weird, but but this is not that.
Well, I think so I 100% agree with you that I had a very similar thing when I was a kid, because I loved A Link to the Past because I was like, oh my God, this story's amazing. And I am the hero of ages and I defeated Ganon and I am a god, and I felt, amazing. Right. And then I played Ocarina of the Times and all of a sudden it was, or in German, Das Flutenduten. Found that recently. Thought that was funny.
Yeah, there's no way that's a joke to trick Americans. That's definitely it.
Yeah. The Germans are like, there's no way they're gonna buy. Oh my God, they're buying it.
Oh my God. I posted this on Reddit just to see if anybody would bite, but it's everywhere now.
But we're in too deep. We have to change the language. So all this is true. But no, and then, Ocarina of Time, where I'm like, I am the hero of time. I have saved Zelda, my love, and, defeated Ganon and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, hey, man, you want to go fishing? I'm like, no, I don't want to play Zelda fishing. No, I don't want to play Oracle of Seasons. Like, seasons? You want me to go collect acorns? Am I going to collect acorns? I was smashing gods 2 minutes ago. I don't care. So I think that, and now that I'm older, those giant overarching like hero narratives can be fun, but they're not necessarily like the thing that I always gravitate to. Right. So I think that it's kind of like when you're a kid, you're like, all right, hey, I got a cookie, now a sugar cookie, now the most sugariest cookie in all of Sugarington. And at some point you're like, there are other tastes out there. There are other stories to be told. So I think that now was the time for me to play this. Otherwise I would have just been all put out before now and been like, well, what I'm not doing? I'm not saving the world. I don't even care about this, man. That's why I couldn't play Majora's Mask. I was like, who cares?
We will probably at some point have to circle back to Majora's Mask. And there's Oracle of Ages and there's Wind Waker and there's Minish Cap. And I think in 2 years comes around. Like there's so much Zelda. There's so many Zelda games.
I mean, Zelda in this Zelda. How long until we can play the most recent one? What was it?
Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, when can we play Breath of the Wild?
In like 14 years.
We'll get there.
No, I mean, I believe we can do it.
Yeah. That'll be our last episode when that one comes of age.
Then we will be. God, oh my God. Okay, we need to chill, and so we can actually talk about the game properly. If you like what we're doing, you can make sure you subscribe to the show. You can follow me on some socials, but the best way to get in touch with us is feedback form on the website. We also have a Discord. Pretty chill. You can find links for all that crap on the website. But feedback form is best for, hey, your opinions are wrong. Also, hey, you should play this game, because we love to do audience requests as much as we possibly can. Quick aside to my shilling. We got a review on Apple Podcasts, which is another way you can support us, because then people know that you think the show is good and you should listen to it. And I love it because they specifically call us out over something that I think is completely legitimate. It's a glowing review. It's like a paragraph and a half long. It's just, I love their chemistry, and they really try to be insightful while still like having fun. The way they reviewed Super Metroid was not great. I'm really not convinced they understood what makes that game good. And I was just like, damn, I love this. Like, because this is someone who is willing to say, I really enjoy what you're doing. Also, I really don't love this one thing you did. And it's like, we've made hundreds of episodes at this point, and that was fairly early on. So like, I'll take that all day. Like if you really disagree with something, not just like you crapped on my game that I like, but like if you don't think our reasoning held up, like, yes, please give us that follow-up. I want to hear that feedback.
You know what we should do actually is maybe one game a year. We should, or one of these a year, we should first put it out there and say, what is the game that you think we completely screwed up our review on? And then go back and replay it and see if our review held up.
Yeah. That
like
might
replay the game, re-listen to it and say, all right, do I maintain those feelings or have I changed?
Yeah. We were talking about the year in review a little bit. I think that might be a cool addition to that, kind of like, all right, like here's how we feel. How do you feel? I like that.
Yeah. Something like that. But yeah, because I do kind of want to go back and play at some point Super Mario World, again, like the first one that we did.
That one terrifies me. I have not managed to re-listen to that episode. I'm scared.
Oh, unfortunately, I went back and re-listened to our Sonic 2 episode, and I was like, "Oh my god, we've gotten better at doing this. Thank God, because that's almost unlistenable."
If you want to recommend episodes besides those two, because those were the first two, that's, I think, the best way to get other people into the show. Find a game that you think we did a good job reviewing and you enjoyed that episode for, and share that. That's even more helpful than the Apple's podcasts. If you want to really go above and beyond, you can give us money on Patreon. Everybody who supports at every level gets the after show, which is just more show. Only available to Patreon subscribers of all levels. But if you support at a high enough level, you can get shouted out. So first, we have to thank our 8-bit classics. Jacob.
A beautiful spring season.
Yarno.
A sweltering summer season.
Jason.
A august autumn season, because I'm not saying fall.
John.
A wonderful wintry wonderland season.
And Kevin.
A mushy flying bear.
And our 16-bit hero, Michael.
A rock hard rod of seasons.
Salty. Or saucy. No, well, I don't know. You might be salty about it, but that was saucy, yeah.
Yeah. It was saucy. We'll see if we're going to be salty. But
yeah. All right. Should we talk about the game properly?
Yes, that feels like a thing that we do here at some point.
Eventually.
So I've got actually a lot of notes for audio visual, but I mean, they kind of a lot of them fall into the category of this absolutely to me looks like a Zelda game. This game is kind of threading the line between being its own thing and paying enough homage / being enough, like pulling enough copyrighted material so that way people can point to it and go, oh, hey, look, a thing that I like. It's kind of reference. So, for example, a lot of the bad guys are, reimaginings of the way that they were in original Legend of Zelda, or in A Link to the Past, But that being said, is that the game's gorgeous. It's a Zelda game.
I have realized too, now that we've played, I don't know, a handful or more Game Boy Color games, I love this art style because every sprite is limited to, I think, just 3 colors, and they do an unbelievable amount of lifting with that. Like, they still manage to get expression. When Link tries to pull something and what'd you name yourself?
Link.
I went with Lunk. I like Lunk.
Yeah. That's fair.
You try to pull something and you don't have the power bracelet. You get like the little sweat lines, and he like throws his head back and his arms are stretched out in front of him because he's trying so hard. Right. And it's like, the sprite, I think, is actually a 1 by 1 pixel. It's just a solid green block. And yet somehow they managed to convey like a lot of character and emotion in it. And I think that supports my like view of what Zelda is supposed to look like, right? Like the original Zelda, Link to the Past, and now the Game Boy iterations that we've played, it's like, oh, this is just Link is a little dude with a little green hat, or sometimes pink hair if you're playing Link to the Past, right? Like, he's just that's like what he looks like, which I think is why when is Twilight Princess the GameCube one?
Yes.
Right.
And Wind Waker, technically.
Yes, true. But Twilight Princess was like so serious. Like,
well, that was the thing, is because it was Wind Waker came out first, and so
did it?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Because Twilight Princess was on the GameCube and the Wii. It like did the weird bridge. Yeah, you're right.
because that was the thing, is that like they came out, they were like GameCube, and oh my gosh, the GameCube, and look at all of the pixels, and people were like, yeah, and they're like, and there's gonna be a Zelda game, and they're like, yeah, and it's gonna be a cartoon, no, and so and so people got really upset about that, and I'll be honest, at the time, myself included, because I wanted to see the epic, super serious Ocarina of Time, and so then they did that, and even I was like, I don't know, guys, this feels a little dark, like
right, because so I grew up reading in Nintendo Power the Zelda comic, which I still contend is phenomenal, and everyone should read it. The Super Mario Brothers comic is also phenomenal, but he never looks masculine or manly or even like an adult. Like he always kind of looks cute in anime and everything. Like things are serious, and it's not like Rugrats where it's his perception of the world is what makes it serious. Like Ganon really is trying to kill everyone, and everything is really dangerous, and lives are on the line, and the future of whatever H named civilization you're trying to rescue. But when I look at this, I see these cute little sprites, but that doesn't make it any harder for me to believe that like the stakes are high and things are serious, right? But then when they got to Twilight Princess, it was just like so angry. So I not only do I really love this art style in general, but to me this is what Zelda looks like.
Right. And I think that again, when we kind of I feel that Zelda, there was a period of time in the franchise where it was starting to lose its footing, where they were like, we don't know how to really Zelda. So I feel that this game's visuals and kind of feel is what bore out, because if you look at
Breath of the Wild,
I always think Wind Waker, and I don't know why, because it's Breath and Wild. I don't know. Anyways, Breath of the Wild. If you look at that one again, that animation style, like it has beautiful colors and it's vibrant, even though super serious Calamity Ganon's gonna come kill everyone, but overall it's not like everything's terrible all of the time forever, so and this game is more in line with that, right, where it's like, okay, so this Kirkland Ganon is going to take over the world or whatever, right? But you get to ride in the kangaroo, and you get to hop on a flying bear,
and he wears boxing gloves, and the bear is like chubby and he's got little wings. Like,
and
how is this not fun? Don't you people like fun?
he butt pounds the ground, like it's fun. I will a couple of other just pure visual notes is one of the things I think that this game did that was cool from a visual standpoint is and it plays a little bit in the mechanics is they do some side scrolling bits. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that seems to be a thing the Game Boy Zeldas just thought was cool. Like as far as I can tell, they all do it. I don't know if that continued into the Game Boy Advance era, but the Game Boy one that I sadly can't remember the name of, and the two that are on the Game Boy Color, is just like platforming segments. And I agree, like they do exist. But visually, they're neat. Mechanically, I agree. There's some questions to be raised.
Yeah, but I kind of like it, just if nothing else, than for it visually and even mechanically, for a difference in kind, in the sense that, and one of the things that I remember is, when you get the ability to dive right underwater, is I was like, what's that even going to be like? And it was like 2-dimensional side scroller. I was like, I like this. I liked that, I was like, okay, cool. So now I can dive underwater, and that's kind of neat.
Well, if I recall, the original Zelda, which the Game Boy Zeldas all pulled pretty heavily from in their visual style, because you couldn't do Link to the Past on the Game Boy Color, right? The original Zelda, when you were in a dungeon and you went into the room in the dungeon that had the dungeon item, that's where you climbed down the ladder and you walked to the side, and then you went up a little ladder. Sometimes there were bats, and you could see the item, right? And so like you knew, like, oh, there's the raft, or there's the whatever, right? And so like you're like trying to dodge enemies, but you're like excited to go get the item. And I'm not an expert, but I think that's literally it. That is the only place in console Zelda that had 2D sections, because Zelda 2 is all 2D, so that doesn't count, right? And then
also that game doesn't count.
Agreed. But Link to the Past, it's going to blow my mind if I'm mistaken about this, but there are 0 2D sections in that, right? So
I concur.
The Game Boy ones, even though they all came out after Link to the Past, I would say from a visual style, they're actually pulling much more heavily from Zelda 1 for the Nintendo, which kind of makes sense when you think about the limitations of the Game Boy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that to speak to some of the limitations is that so the screen's smaller, right? I didn't actually count. I promised. I was like, I'm going to count out the pixels, and then I was like, it's starting to get close to research.
It's close. The Game Boy is close to square. It's like 110 by 120 or something. It's because like a regular like old fashioned television was 4:3, and this is like 9:10 or like 11:12 or something. It's really close to square.
Well, and I also think, and this is the unit that I wanted it in, was not units pixels, but units links. How many links fit across the screen? Because I think that some of the puzzles and some of the mechanics couldn't be as complex because there wasn't as much screen to pull it all together.
10 links.
10 links for this one.
I mean, assuming that my rough estimation was accurate, yeah.
So how does that compare to how many links for Link to the Past?
Oh, this has got to be less. It has to be.
And that's kind of what I'm driving at, right? Is that like, when you have only so many, when you have 10 links to deal with as opposed to 15 links to deal with, let's just say, right? Then it's like, okay, well, some of the complexity of what you can do mechanically has to be toned down a bit, because you can't have a puzzle with 3 levers because you can't fit enough obstacles between 3 levers, so it has to be 2, that type of thing. So but that being said, I was going into it, I was certain that was going to be an obstacle where I was gonna be like, oh, all these puzzles are samey because and I did that was not my lived experience, so
no, and this is the combat heavy one. Oracle of Ages is the puzzle heavy one. Yeah,
excellent.
Right. I want to make sure while we're still talking about audio visuals, I gotta shout out the little cutscenes things. Like, there's only a few of them right at the beginning, and there's some like toward the end. But I love them. They're adorable, right? Yep. They reassert like Link is kind of a goofy kid. He's not this angry, furrowed browed adult. So I just right at the beginning of the game, you get dumped into him like riding on the horse like toward the camera, and I was like, oh right, because this came out after Ocarina of Time. Yeah, they had to do that. And then when you start a new file, you meet up with like Din and the other randos who are like celebrating with her in the woods, and she's like, dance with me, Lunk. And then it actually cuts to a full screen. It's a still it's not an animation, it's like a still picture, but it kind of pans. Like it's wider than the screen is, so it like pans across the frame, and it's her like dancing and like looking like she's having the time of her life, and you like obviously struggling because you are not a dancer, and it's just these like 300 pixels in vibrant Game Boy Color colors, like this tells me so much about him and her and kind of like what the tone, like how they want me to feel about the way the world is right now, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to be that way for long, right? So you just have these little tiny like visual flourishes that can't stand in for fully 3D rendered camera zooming in on Ganon's face and then camera zooming in on Link's face, and he's all like, ah, right? I get that, but they tried to remember we need to communicate some things about these characters because the games are story light. So we're going to use the visuals to communicate kind of who they are and sort of like how they function in the world. And I think even with just the literally like 3 screens at the beginning of the game, they nail it.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like you said, that does a lot of heavy lifting that they then don't have to rehash or reinvigorate. It's like, oh, hey, Link is not only obviously going to be the hero, but he's like unassuming. He's not, all tatted up and got his gat, and he's not Samuel L. Jackson. He is Link is not in fact a mushroom cloud laying Mother Fairy.
Be a super different game.
I would play that. I would play Ocarina of Time, but wherever because like Link's the silent protagonist, like they just have Samuel L. Jackson voice over what he's quote unquote saying. It's like
it could just be Link. Over all the like the swinging noises.
What? Say it again. Say what again?
You could make this mod just from Pulp Fiction sound clips. Like you wouldn't even have to go out into the rest of its catalog.
Oh, that's fantastic. Somebody make that for us. Um, a couple of other things. So the last visual note that I have for visual sake is at the very beginning, this game kind of sold me a little bit because it said, "Hey, how fast you want that text speed?" And I was like, "As fast as you can make it, please and thank you." You know,
there's something very honest about putting that up front. Hey,
yep.
There's some text in this game. It's not super text heavy. Hey, there's some text in this game though. How much can you read? Like, I just love it.
Yeah. Because I will get very irritated if all of a sudden it's like, hello, Link, please. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I feel, I get the exact same emotion with that as I do when somebody is speaking in a meeting and they say like, so we had an issue, and I don't think it's a big issue, but and you're like, say it, say the thing, like provide context to all of this.
You've said so many words and you have not communicated any information.
Yeah, it's like the guy from the Foundation series where it's like he was here for 4 days and he said literally nothing. So I really like that because then you can just hammer through it as fast as you like. That's neat. So I had a couple of things on music. One is iconic music right out of the gate. You know, I like that. I like it. Lets me know I'm playing a Zelda game. Also, the sound. So one of the things that I noticed for sound effects that I thought was kind of cool is that when you walk through water, it gives you like the clopping through water noise, which I really appreciated because when I was initially looking at it, I said like, I literally said, what is that? I couldn't quite make out the fact that like that was supposed to be thin water, you know?
Oh yeah, there's the shallow and then the deep.
Right. So the first time I saw shallow water, I was like, what? I'm not sure what that is. And the minute I started walking through it and heard the sound effect, I said, that is water. Okay, I'm with you now, you know? So I think that they did a good job with mixing the sound effects with the visuals. So where they had like weak visuals, they made sure that they had strong sound effects to reinforce the fact of like, hey, this is what this is.
Yeah, you get, I think like a rustling noise in the leaves, right? When enemies are going to like pop up out of something, they make kind of like a brrr, like when they pop out, right? There's all the bog standard, like swooshy sword noise, the Zelda, like you hit them and did damage, or you hit them and you didn't do damage noise.
Versus tink, tink.
Yeah, and the reason I noticed that one is because there's at least one place where they screw it up. So, yeah, the boss of the 4th dungeon, he's like a crab thing, and he has like one big claw, right? So you have to knock his claw off, and you get
that was the dancing dragon lair.
Yes. Correct. You have to hit him in the claw to knock his claw off, and then you get you are causing damage like flash, like palette flash, but it makes your sword is hitting a rock like tink noise. And I get why they probably chose to do that was because you're not actually damaging the boss, but no,
you are doing the right thing.
Yeah, but you are doing the right thing, and there's like an incongruency between what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Now, like all Game Boy games, they probably had to design this game to be played with the volume off in the back of a minivan while your mom is telling you to put down that goddamn Nintendo. Like, I totally get it, but overall, the sound effects are actually pretty good. Like, they're not grating. Like, they took away the terrible like superpower acorn that you get in the other Game Boy Zelda that has like, oh god, that little song loop is just not long enough, and like it repeats so many times and it's terrible. So like overall, like the sound direction and the music direction in this is just way better, but that one thing just jumped out at me. Is like, aha, I gotcha. Your perfect 100 is now a 99.
Yeah, because you're human like me. Take that, imperfect human.
Yeah.
Agreed. And actually, that was the other kind of sound effects that I had, which is that I felt that the sound effects, none of them were grating. They were all enjoyable. And I don't know what it was, but you killed an enemy, and when they explode, like the explode spark and the exploding noise was like super satisfying. I loved murdering Pete. Like the murder was a lot of fun in this game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many little things that I hate to say, oh, well, it's because Capcom made this game, but it's because Capcom made this game. Like they are famous for their sprite work and their music. like, this is the company that was making Mega Man on 3 consoles at this point, right? They made them on and also a bunch of other consoles. Nobody cares about that. They made it on the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, and the Game Boy, right? And then they went on to probably make others, I've been told. But at this time in history, this company, if you were going to just point and say like, oh, what's a company that makes JRPGs? You'd be like Squaresoft. And oh, what's a company that makes like really great sprite work and soundtracks? Like Capcom, right? Like I'm not the kind of person who follows, bands, sport teams, authors, directors, but like even I know what makes Capcom famous. And there are so many little moments where I was just like, if it didn't say Capcom on the splash screen when you fire up the game, I think I might still suspect that they had a hand in this.
Yeah, no, it definitely has that feel. Do you have anything else for audiovisual?
I have one other thing that I think actually might be a decent segue into more of the gameplay, because it's visually not that big of a problem. It's when you start to interact with it, which is doing an overworld map on a Game Boy sure is hard. There's a lot of information you need to get in there. And to their credit, they do a fairly smart little thing, which is the map basically looks like nothing. It's like topography at best. Like, hey, there's stuff over here and there's water over there and there's forest in this third place, right? So it's super not detailed, but you can grid square by grid square scroll over it, and it will give you also a very small and not super detailed little preview of what is in that area. And so if you go over an area where there's a dungeon, there's a dungeon. And if you go over an area, like over a town, it's like, oh, this is the building that is in this part of town, right? So you still need to keep a tremendous amount of information either in your head, or I actually didn't look up the manual for this one because I was like, it's Zelda, I trust them to direct me around the world. Maybe there's a map, because some Zelda games come with physical paper maps. But
yeah, I actually read the manual for this.
You did not. Shut up. Shut up. You lying liar whose lying mouth speaks only lies.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah. No, there's no goddamn way. So maybe the Nintendo Power maybe came with it, right? But I don't envy someone trying to make a map at this scale that is actually like useful visually and interactable with so few buttons on the controller. So mechanically, I don't know that it really helped me very much, but they did include a map and it does sort of function.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it does the best it can with what it has, right? Is that basically what they needed was a bristle brush and some Comet, and what they had is a toothbrush and some toothpaste, and they cleaned the area they could, but it is what it is. But gameplay,
yeah, I don't love a 2-button Zelda. Like, I get it, but it's hard, man. So hard. Yeah. Like, you gotta swap things so much. You don't have those other face buttons. You don't have shoulder buttons. Like, they give you so many tools, and I got over it going in and out of the start menu, but for that first like hour or two that I was playing, I was just like, oh my God, you have to pause the game constantly.
Yeah, it's like the water temple from Ocarina, but all the time, because it's like, okay.
It's exactly that. And considering this came after Ocarina.
Well, because they were like, hey man, people are willing to tolerate this in Ocarina. I guess that people are willing to I guess this is fun gameplay.
I mean, there's no way around it, which is why I feel like it's forgivable. And to be fair, I mean, it's lightning fast, right? It is way faster than the iron boots in Ocarina.
Yeah.
So but God, shoulder buttons, being able to just like cycle through your items. Oh my God, it'd be so good.
Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the other choices that they made that I think was helpful is that you have 2 buttons and both of them can be swapped out for different items, so you can make it so your sword isn't one of them, so if you're going into an area where you're like, I'm switching between using these 2 items constantly, right? And you're like, all right, well then I'm just not going to have my sword equipped during this, so I think they could have done a little bit more to build the game around that, in the sense that I do feel that there were areas where, I was primarily using 2 different items, and then, but they would also put bad guys in there. So now I have to use my sword, right? Whereas if they said like, hey, we're going to make this puzzle, and so none of the puzzles will require for you to use more than 2 items. And if it does require if it requires one item, then we can put bad guys in there. If it requires 2 items, then this room does not have bad guys in it, you know?
Or
So
it's an item that has like a time-based effect.
Damage.
Right? Well, so like the speed seed, whichever seed, the seed of speed, I don't know, whatever. That when you use that, it stays in effect. So technically you could use one, open the menu, put your sword and shield back on, and now the seeds are no longer equipped, but the effect is still in place. I don't honestly think you ever are like incentivized to do that, but they could kind of cheat in a third item where it's like, oh, you have to use this item, then while that effect is happening, use these other 2 items.
Yep. Agreed. So basically for me, for gameplay, I've got kind of 2 categories of notes, which is like mechanics, and then a whole bunch of them that I got kind of lobbed in is story.
Okay.
And so for the story ones, they're all kind of like faffy throwaway stuff, but I think they're kind of fun. So I just wanted to run through them real fast, which is one is that, so you're collecting essences of nature, right? And I get that, it's a fun game. But this is one of the reasons why I'm glad I played it now versus like 20 years ago, because
Link's Awakening, that is the other one for the Game Boy that we played. Super sorry. Please go on. Because you collect instruments in that one. And for some reason, that was the thing, because you have to play the song that wakes up the space whale. So I'm super sorry. Please carry on.
Fair enough. But this one, you're collecting essences of nature, right? And again, you know, like in the original ones, you were collecting, you know, shards or whatever, imprisoned princesses or sages, right? And, you know, stuff like that, right? And this one, essences of nature, and that just doesn't feel as epic, you know? But again, I'm fine with that now. But as a kid, I would have been like, oh, so what? I'm collecting like, you know, like autumn leaves, like who gives a crap, you know? That. So the other one is that it feels, this to me, I think the analogy is like, I had historically played Dragon Ball Z, you know, like the TV show, and this is a movie, you know, it has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like, it's when you watch, you know, Dragon Ball Z, Lord Slug's Return Revenge or whatever, right? Yeah, you're like, yeah, this is kind of Dragon Ball Z. It's not
it's a whole season crammed into 75 minutes.
It's a whole season crammed into 75 minutes where they kind of ignore some of the rules, but also expect for you to like have watched the main show, you know, like, so that when I was playing through, I'm like, I felt this feeling before. What is this? This is a DBZ movie. Then the only other 2 story things I had is one, I am convinced that I'm not sure that we are the hero in this one, because we are definitely running around extorting old men through like
some of them extort you back.
But yeah, like when you know, I ran up to the first old man, and I think they always say, you know, make sure this stays a secret, and then they give you money, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like that's extortion, right?
Yeah. Well, one of them, I think his line is, thank you for paying to fix my door. And then he takes money from you.
Yeah, that's very very mafia. I don't think I ran into that one, or I don't remember it, but
I think the ratio is like there's slightly more beneficial ones to harmful ones, but and I don't think the harmful ones take away as much as the beneficial ones give you, but it's kind of, I think it's a little tongue in cheek at this point. The fact that Skyward Sword, I think, has the Rupor, the like dark gray.
Oh, yeah.
No, stupid.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that's something, because I can't think of a. Well, no, I take that back. I was gonna say I can't think of a thing that you own that would have negative value, but that's definitionally hazardous waste. So they're hazardous waste.
Yeah, it's not fun. I want to, before I forget, because I think I had this in my notes and then I might have taken it out when I was consolidating, but Zelda games on the whole, I would say, as let's say 2D Zelda games, they're very story light, and they're like, here's an outline, and now you kind of project onto that, right? Is Link literally a mute, or is it just that like they don't give him a voice so that you're his voice, right? And like right. The more sophisticated the games get, the more they have to have other characters talking and have lots of NPCs in the towns who like do things and talk about their lives and stuff. And like the games get just bigger, and that's not good or bad, but 2D Zelda has a very consistent, lightweight, like there's a little bit of talking at the top, there's a little bit of talking like near the beginning when you're kind of like getting oriented, and then a little bit at the end, and that's kind of it, right? It's not super story heavy in terms of like exposition, and yet it does feel very story heavy in terms of like what you are accomplishing and why it matters. And one of the places that a little bit of dialogue I think went a super long way in this is you said, oh, you're collecting essences of nature, like that doesn't feel as epic. And I agree with you, like there's something way simpler about saving maidens trapped in crystals, right? Unsheathing the Master Sword and stabbing Ganon in his dumb face. Like that's
into the heart of evil.
Right. It's super like, and it's very like little boy in the suburbs is like, I could find a sword in the woods and become the hero of, right? I mean, it speaks directly to our like lived experience. Like I want to be Link, right? So the line of dialogue in this that I thought was really smart for them to include, because I don't talk to NPCs in Zelda games. No, ain't nobody got time for that. But I happened to talk to this one. It's an older woman, and she is like she has some kind of farming implement, and she's like at the crops. And it's right when you get to town, and it's right after like the Rod of Seasons has gone all to crap, and the Temple of Seasons is burst into flames, and everything is all screwed up. And she expresses her very real concern that with the seasons changing randomly, it will be impossible for them to grow food. And I was like, it's like 2, maybe 3 sentences of dialogue you get from her. And I was just like, right. Because this isn't just like, oh, sometimes I can't walk this way because there's water, and other times I can walk this way because the water's been frozen into ice. Like, people live here. And like, this has got to be completely devastating for like the local ecology. And so maybe if you go around and you talk to other NPCs, you get like more of that, or maybe it's just all faffy, here's how you play the game stuff. But something about that just jumped out at me as like, I don't know that I would have appreciated that as a youth, like as a less experienced consumer of narratives, like just this couple lines of like, this is why this is a problem, by the way, like you're not from here. You're going to piss off back to Hyrule or whatever. But like, if you don't solve this problem, we're all going to starve to death if we don't freeze to death first. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, no. Okay. Yeah. This is important. I should care about this.
Right. And I think that's the, like one of the things that I had to learn as well, you know, as I got older, which is that like the scale of the narratives doesn't necessarily change the stakes of the narratives, right? You know, so one of the things that, you know, when you're a kid is man, if you ain't blowing up the earth, then what are you even doing? You know, and that's very again like normal Legend of Zelda, where it's like if Ganon is allowed to be in control, he will spread darkness throughout the entire realm, and all like literal monsters will come out and eat people. You're like, oh my god. But you know, and then but there are also ones where it's just like, hey, you know, what's going to happen if we don't do this? It's like, you know, people are going to die. Not in a spectacular orcs are going to come in and chop their heads off, but you know, they'll starve to death. It's no good. It's not what you're looking for.
As we were warming up before we started recording, I was talking about Star Trek Discovery. The threat in season 1 is the destruction of the multiverse. And I literally,
where do you go from there?
Yeah, I just literally turned to Susan and I was like, that's not a great sign, because the stakes are never going to be higher than that. And since we know where the show happens in the timeline, it turns out the good guys win because all of creation is not unmade. Like what are they going to threaten us with next time? Right.
Yeah.
Like, I got a hangnail and it's super itchy. Like what are you doing? So I have come to appreciate like the more human Hylian, Halorian, whatever these people are. I've come to appreciate the more like person to person story of an individual farmer turning to Link and being like, please, like adventurer, like save us. I personally don't want to die. If I die, the whole realm isn't going to fall apart, but I would like to not die. And you seem like you also care about people not dying horribly. And like, that's enough.
Yes. Well, actually, this is slightly tangential, but one of the things that many narratives struggle with is scope creep, you know, where it's like, okay, well, first it was the farm, and then it was the nation, and then it was the world, and then it was the galaxy, and then the multiverse, and then the Uber, and you're like, oh my God, you know, like I can't, and we as humans, we aren't, you know, evolutionarily, we're not like made to see things in that scope. We can kind of wrap our head around it, but once you get above the Earth, it's like, okay, Earth, multiverse, whatever, right? Which narrative handles that incredibly well of resetting scope creep? Steven Universe. Because if you look at Steven Universe, there's always like a big thing going on that like, oh my gosh, all of Beach City is in trouble, right? And then the next one is like Garnet's mad at Pearl, and like you have to resolve that thing because it's about the interpersonal conflict, and so you have to like reset those narratives sometimes, right? So yeah, no, I think that kid me would have been like, oh man, it's not all of Hyrule and zombies aren't coming to kill people, what the hell? But for this one, I was like, yeah, like essences of nature, I'm in. It does not feel as epic, and I feel like I might not have made this clear. It doesn't feel as epic. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like it not being epic doesn't mean that I don't care. I mean, one of my favorite games in the world is The Last of Us, and literally there's one person whose life you're trying to save in that, and honestly, you end a lot more lives trying to save that one life. So
yeah, the balance sheet is super in the red at the end of that, unless it turns out any amount of people is worth Ellie, which is apparently the price we're willing to pay.
I will kill as many people as I have to, as long as she isn't one of them.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So the one note that I did have for the story though is I don't feel strongly about this, but is that you start off, princess captured, got to save the world, got to save Lunk's team. But then they immediately they dump you into Kakariko Village, basically. It's not Kakariko Village, but it is. And you have to go and you talk to a whole bunch of people, and they're kind of introducing all of the different mechanics. They introduce like how the seeds work and how this works, and then how do you appraise rings and how do those work, right? I didn't like that much front-loaded tutorial. I wanted my sword. I wanted to go out, explore a little bit, kill a few things, and then come back and say like, okay, now tell me about these rings, tell me about these seeds. But I couldn't do that until I talked to 15 different people so they could tell me where to go get my sword. So I didn't care for that. That was just me though.
No, I think I'm with you, because that's like all of it, right? Like you don't get any real additional handholding or tutorial after that. It's just, all right, like here's how everything works, even though a bunch of this is not going to be immediately relevant. Some of it, as far as I can tell, you can basically just ignore the rings, like kind of indefinitely. So
yeah,
I don't know, maybe I would have had a totally different experience if I engaged with that mechanic, but like they make such a big deal out of it when you go talk to the guy and he's like, whoa, dude, you've got a ring box, and hey man, rings only work if they're equipped, so make sure you're wearing a ring. And I was just like, oh man, this is going to be super important. And then several dungeons later, I kind of had the realization of like, what was that thing I was supposed to care about? Man, that guy sure did care about it. He owned a store that like his whole business was caring about this thing. And so that was kind of weird. But I think they either included mechanics that ended up being like, oh, whoops, we didn't center anything in the game around that mechanic. And it's not the seeds. The seeds super matter, right? Yeah. So it's not seeds. The seeds are relevant to lots of puzzles and lots of dungeons and combat interactions and stuff. The rings, not so much. So maybe, don't force that on me at the same time you're forcing on me like how to get and use your sword, because if you put those two things side by side, basic design principles tell you that proximity is like causation, right? Like because these things are proximal, they must be comparably important. If you have like a safe deposit box at the bank and you have like, oh, my will is in here, and all of my like the keys to the safe are in here, and all of the information about how to collect my life insurance. Also, this weird figurine I found one time when I was out hiking, and it's like, oh, is that like magic? Like what? Why is that in? Like, why is that in with all the other like obviously important stuff? And it's like, oh, because I kind of like it. And it's just like, okay, right? It's you can't do that, and especially because the game has the optional come in here and talk to I think they're birds, right? The colorful birds. It's like the tutorial house,
Yeah.
So they provide you with that. That's where the rings should be. Like all the ring information should be either in tutorial house, or the ring guy's house should be like way off the beaten path, and you like maybe stumble upon it. It's like, oh wow, there's this crazy like extra mechanic. But yeah, I'm with you that it's like it's too much, and it's not all equally relevant.
Right. And I think that, again, like even if it was, hey, and this is just for me, my sword's my security blanket, it lets me know that I can handle problems, so saying, what you're about to experience is so important that we're not even going to give you a sword. I'm like, okay, you've got my attention. And then, so it's just like, but you be very judicious with what, what it is. It's I was over at a friend's house recently, and their son was swinging, like 6-year-old, 7-year-old, something like that, was swinging around some foam nunchucks, right? And then and I just like turned around and he was like swinging them like near me. I just put my hand out, and then he wound back, and I said, just think real hard before you do what you're about to do next. And he kind of slowly put it down and walked away. Yeah, I was like, but I say all that to say that, when somebody says, hey man, we're going to do some tutorial. Hey, tutorial for games, you need to know how to play the game. I got it. It's like, and we're going to do it before you get your sword. Okay. Think long and hard about what you put in that area, because my tolerance for listening is going to drop precipitously because I want that sword,
Well, and it's asking someone who has any amount of games literacy. Maybe if this was your first video game, you wouldn't feel this so acutely. But if you have any games literacy, it's like, oh, hey, we're going out. We all got to get in the car. And it's like, wait, before you do anything else, like when someone starts a sentence like that, you're on super high alert, right?
Yeah.
But before you take another step, do you remember to turn the lights off upstairs? It's like, Jesus, like, why did you put me on such high alert for that? And that's like in a Zelda, right? Or in pretty much any kind of actiony adventure, like I don't even have my primary tool yet. and you just told me where to go get my primary tool. And now you're asking me to hang on. It's like, you have me, like, I'm holding my breath. What must be so important? And I know I don't want to speak for everybody in the audience, but it probably sounds like we're going like really over the top on this, but it does feel, it's not just out of place for this game type. It's out of place for this game. Never again did I experience a moment in the game where they were like, wait, just hang on a second. The rest, once you get the sword, they're like, all right, go save the world, ass, like get out of here. Right. And so it's so weird to just have this like sphincter clenching moment right at the beginning of the game before you can even defend yourself.
And I think that's probably the thing, is that all they did was they said, hey, we just need them to focus up, is it would be the equivalent of, to use your analogy, right? You're getting ready to leave, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, I need to make sure that we turn off the lights because, I want to make sure the electric bill's low. Hey, Lions. Did you turn off the lights? It's like, because in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is just a thing I've got to check on my list, right? But I'm deaf to like how it's making you feel, So yeah, but that being said, one of the other things I did want to touch on that kind of links back to visuals a little bit and the number of lunks on the screen. Link's sword reach is enormous in this game, man.
It's a tile. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's great.
It's but again, like when you look at it as far as like in ratio of, the screen, right? I felt like that when I became aware of a bad guy, I could swing my Goron longsword across, like it felt like, what it was is I didn't feel like Link. I felt like Cloud, Yeah.
So I will say,
I don't think there's anything to be done about it. I just think that it's interesting how just changing the number of links on the screen and that your sword is one link, that does change the feel sometimes of like, oh man, I'm packing.
The counterbalance to that is, like most Zelda games, you are slow. you're so slow, right? Because in 3D Zelda, that's when they had to add like the little hop jump and the little tuck roll, right? And so you have these things that let you move in bursts. And most of the time, you don't need overland speed, right? You're not running a marathon. It's because you're in a sword fight or you're fighting a demon or something, and you just don't want to get your head bitten off. So you need to like dodge roll out of the way. But 2D Zeldas, at least all the ones I've played, they don't got no dodge roll. So can I stab the thing? Like, can I reach it to put my sword through its squishy bits? Like, that was never a problem. But will it then also collide into me because it doesn't have like a knockback animation or whatever, the answer is often like, yes, like I can stab it and it'll stab me back. And because this game does what every 2D Zelda that I've played does, like you can get hit fast. You do not have much of a window of invincibility. So God forbid you end up like overlapped with something that causes damage. Like you're in serious trouble. So I agree with you. Massive sword range. It is somewhat tempered by the fact that you can't really just stand there and swing away. Like eventually stuff will come at you from a weird angle, or it will just not have a knockback and it will penetrate your incredible reach and you'll still take damage anyway.
Yeah, and that's fair. One of the other things that I really enjoyed that I thought was unique to this one, or at least because where I draw most of my Zelda is from the consoles, the main storyline, not the movies, is man, I like being able to jump. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty great. You were talking about like what items do I need on this screen? If I knew I was just walking somewhere, you better believe I had that rock feather equipped and I was just jumping.
Oh, yeah.
Just jumping.
Yeah. Just running around. Right. And it's one of those things where I got mad at myself because literally I had the feather and I went into an area and I was like, okay, I can't go here because there's a pit. Yeah. And I, explored. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Oh, that's right. I can jump in this one. Yeah, that's a very easy obstacle to get past, So it did take me a little bit of time to internalize that mechanic in my head of like, oh, I have a way to deal with, and it's actually, what, now I think about it, original Legend of Zelda had the exact same mechanic, that was the ladder.
Yeah. Pits become a solvable problem.
Right. Yeah. But I think that's not thinking about it out loud. It's fascinating because my brain recognizes those as two different things, but like it's mechanically, it's like, yeah, the pits are now, you can now traverse pits, one link wide pits.
Yeah. Well, and then later when you get the Pegasus seed, which lets you dash, now you can do, I think, 2, maybe 3, right? Because you can dash and then long jump over a bigger pit, but only in a straight line, right? You can't you still have to have something to land on the other side. This actually kind of segues me to something I wanted to ask you about. Like, this is I'm told, the combat focused part, because this is, I guess, would have been the courage. So this is Link's game, and then the ages is wisdom, because that's the puzzle heavy one. And then I don't know what the plan was for the third. I don't know how far they got in development before they canceled it. But I felt like pretty good about myself when I would say like, oh, wait a minute, this room is actually made up of these doors that use these keys, right? And I can get from here to there, either literally physically move, through the space, or I can solve these problems that are obstacles by using these tools in these orders. And I thought they actually did a pretty good job of taking combat tools, like the slingshot has, once you get the slingshot and you can now shoot seeds with it, it's like, oh, now the seeds went from having their up close use to being able to use that same function, lighting a fire or just doing damage, like hitting an object, but now I can do that at range, right? And so the puzzles, the way you conquer minor obstacles and kind of move about the space actually felt pretty sophisticated. That's one of the, I think it's interesting to measure it in terms of how much complexity could they get onto screen at once, because there are definitely some times where it's yeah, this puzzle, you actually kind of got to scroll back and forth because there's the switches are spread out a little bit. But they also, I think, did a pretty good job of learning okay, what sort of puzzles worked in the original Zelda? What sort of things were fun in Link to the Past? What sort of things have now been fun in Ocarina of Time? How do we take that same sort of mentality and apply it in this visually lighter weight, mechanically lighter weight, fewer buttons, fewer tools you can have equipped at the same time, but still not have everything reduced to a single obvious dungeon use and then that's it. Yes, this is just for lighting torches and that's all it will ever be for. It's no, sometimes you need to set things on fire that are way over there. Sometimes you got an enemy that's weak to fire, right? Sometimes you got an enemy that's weak to fire. There's quick aside, the evil fairy things, the skulls with the flashing
Mhm.
So, okay. So in Link to the Past, do you remember how you defeat those?
Not offhand.
So you throw magic powder on them and then they turn into fairies,
Oh yeah.
right? So
Yep.
if they hit you, that's bad. And the magic powder is only in the square right in front of you. So like it's kind of high risk, but it's super high reward if you can like throw it on them. It's like, oh, now they're a fairy and they're no longer a threat. Like, oh, that was totally worth it. So when you get the mystery seeds in this, I was like, this is the tool you use to defeat those evil fairy skull things. And it's not, you just kill them with the boomerang. And I was like, what? What are you doing?
But my setup, my efforts.
Yeah, I felt so smart and then was just completely destroyed.
Yeah, no, I think I think that what you kind of hit on is something that I think separates like kind of good Zelda games from bad Zelda games, which is the stuff that you get, is it a weapon in your arsenal, or is it just a weapon or tool in your arsenal, or is it like the key that opens the lock in this dungeon? You know, because if it's the latter, then you're like, okay. And I remember feeling that way, and I don't know if it's justified. We should play the game and find out. In Majora's Mask, you know, which was it just, I don't know why it felt like, you know, oh, hey, you got this new mask, so you can be Azora all the time, whenever you want to be. Really only here, though, you know, like
But
only
it
in the
kind of
Zora
only
dungeon.
matters right there.
Yeah, it only matters in the area where we want you to do this thing. It's like, oh, outside of that, it's like, yeah, you could be Azora, but you just look like Azora. Like people interact with you differently, you know. So you're like, oh, this feels a little desaturated, you know. One of the things to kind of tack onto that is and I apologize, I'm going to blank on this, but is that the items that you get at the end of each dungeon also have a mechanical use, you know? And
yes, everything as far as I can think off the top of my head is multi-purpose.
Right, but that's in my mind unique, right? Because, you know, for example, when you get in Link to the Past, when you would go and get, you know, one of the sage's stones to go get the Master Sword, that's all it was. Like there was the item that you got in the dungeon, you know, that helped you through the dungeon. And then then you beat the bad guy, you got your heart container, and then you got your MacGuffin. But that's all it was. It was just a MacGuffin. This is a MacGuffin that like also does a thing. And I'm like, that's kind of cool because you kind of get two items in every dungeon. That's kind of neat.
Dude, that's why Link Between Worlds was so like brain breaky, because you don't get items in dungeons. You buy them from the store. So then you have to figure out, what in the world does this tool I just got interact with? Can I use it to defeat enemies? Can I use it to solve puzzles? Hopefully some of both of those things. Like it's very weird to go into the store and it's like, hey, there's 8 dungeons. Here's 12 items. And you're like, but how will I know what to do? And it's like, figure it out, hero.
It out, man.
Yeah. And the thing is, in universe, they even kind of like wink to the camera a little bit and they're like, figure it out, hero. Like, what tools do you need to solve your problems? And it's like, I don't know. It's like, then you're not a good hero. So like this isn't as extreme as that. Like you still get the thing in the dungeon. You still always use it in that dungeon. But the fact that they're even multi-purpose is like, yes, please, God, don't. Otherwise, just give me keys and locked doors.
Right. Yeah. Actually, this is again a little tangential, but I think figure it out, you know, is something that good video games in general do, is that they don't, you know, they'll lead you by the hand at first, you know, through the tutorial, and then they say, all right, figure it out, you know, and then you do, and you need to be able to like effectively ask the game for help. So if you're like, man, I don't even know where to start with this, and they kind of like, you know, breadcrumb and nudge you back in the right direction and stuff like that. But yeah, I say all that to say that I say that to my children all the time. You know, they're like, you know, Lizzie's doing this. Well, Teddy's doing this. Blah, 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 blah. Yep, figure it out. And literally the other day I said to him, they were fighting in the basement. And Teddy was like, Lizzie's doing this. I said, Teddy, figure it out. And he goes like, but this, that, and the other thing. And I said, hey, Teddy, think it through, man. If you don't come to a resolution, I'm going to take everything away from both of you. So right now you have something. No, I said, like, right now you have nothing because Lizzie has taken it from you. If you continue to do this, you will still just have nothing. So figure out a situation where you can have something. And then he was like, and then I don't honestly know how that resolved, but I know they stopped fighting. So,
which is actually what you're after.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like it when games go, figure it out, hero, because I think that's a good skill to develop. The only other two minor notes that I have that we can either go into or not is obviously the changing of the seasons mechanic. That's really cool.
It is, and it's weird how I think part of the reason that it's not annoying is like the animation is super fast and it makes you think third and a half dimensionally, right? Kind of fourth dimensionally, because you have to think like, what is this space like in this other season, right? So you're thinking spatially, but also sort of like a little bit temporally. Like they never like make you feel dumb. There's always the obvious stump you jump up onto. So there's only specific spots where you can do it. So it's impossible to not know like, oh, I was supposed to use it over here, but I didn't think to use it on that screen. Like there's no stump, no season.
Yep. Well, and it's basically, it's just it's the dark world plus two other worlds, so like it's and the big there. And so they kind of crib some from A Link to the Past, because just like in A Link to the Past, right, is that like there are specific places where you can get into the dark world. There are specific stumps where you can get into the winter realm. And once you're in the winter realm, you're in the winter realm until you can find a way, another portal out of it. So I just think it's really fascinating the way that they can change the varnish. And it feels, like you said, it feels different because we're like, it's a season. So this is like time related, right? And it's like, kind of, but it also works very similarly to, there's no difference between standing on a stump and pressing the button to change the season and going through a portal to the dark realm. Mechanically, those two things are the same. But again, the feel is wildly different, And
I think I might argue that this actually has an advantage that is harder to do with the Light World, Dark World, because in the Light World, Dark World, if you're playing through that game for the first time, there are times where you might be like, am I supposed to be in the dark world right now? Am I supposed to, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with like getting a little lost and confused and having to kind of piece it together. One of the advantages that the season thing has is because it's all happening in the same like temporal space. Like right now it is whatever season it is, and then I can change it. And now right now it's that season. Like I haven't moved to a different space. I'm standing in the same place, and now there's snow on the ground or there isn't. And one of the small advantages you get is there are certain parts where I was like trying to figure out like, okay, so if I make it winter, there'll be snow, which has the helpful little footprints on it, which lets you know there is a way to walk on top of that snow, right? So like if I make it winter, there'll be snow over there, and then I can walk over the top of it, and then maybe that'll like, then I can do whatever, right? I can get somewhere I couldn't get to before. And then you walk a screen to the left instead of a screen to the right. And when you make it winter and then you walk screen to the left and it's instantly autumn or it's instantly spring again. And it's like, so coming over here is not part of the solution, because this area has an enforced season because I do not yet have the tools to make whatever season I need in that area to progress through that area. Right. So like, and it's, I think summer like makes the vines grow. And when it's winter, there's the snow you can climb on. And when it's autumn, it's pleasant and you wear a scarf. Like there's reasons to be in each, there's a reason for the season. Can't believe it took this long for that to come up. But I really appreciated that if you went into an area that no matter what you did on the stump, like area X is always spring or it's always autumn or whatever. It's like, because I need that area to start in autumn to then participate in the rest of the puzzle. So the Light World and Dark World did a similar thing where it's like, like the hammer, the pegs, like the pegs are only pretty much in the Dark World. And so when you first get to the Dark World, there's pegs everywhere because that's how they like steer you around, but it's, you can tell like, should I have the tool? Whereas with the season thing, it's like the game forces that on you. So there's no way to cheat it. There's no way to think you're missing something because there's nothing you can do about it.
Funny side story. I was playing Link to the Past with Teddy and Lizzie. And so we were taking 10-minute turns, right? And we got to an area, and there is an area where you need to use the hammer to get a peg to go down in order to fall into a pit to get to a certain part of a cave, right? And so Lizzie just kept saying, "Dad, go into the pit," and the peg was blocking the way. I was like, "I can't get to the pit." She goes, "But Dad, I go to the pit." I'm like, "I can't get to the pit." "Dad, I go to." I said, "How am I going to get there? Huh? How am I going to do it? Look at that, this peg right there." And I swing my sword at it. I'm like, "Look, what am I?" What do you want from me? What am I supposed to do? And then the one other thing that happened that was amazing was, they were in a one of the little, like an area, and there were just, all there were chickens in the area. And Teddy wings one of the chickens and he goes, and starts to run away. He goes, ha ha ha. And I was like, mm-hmm. And he like kept hitting the chicken. I'm like, do it. And he's wham, 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 wham. And then he got bored and wandered away. And I was like, damn it.
The lesson went unlearned.
Well, no, but then he came back and he was just like, I'm going to hit some more chickens. And I was like, do what you got to do, man.
Did he trigger it?
He did.
Yay.
And he was like, oh God. And I was like, and the problem is I was just kind of like, yeah, man, like if you want to hit some chickens, that's a thing. I was like, that's the thing. So I was like mildly encouraging it. And then I really came down on him about the lesson, that I like, but I also, so I kind of felt like I was like, that was suboptimal parenting, but
you saw him outside playing, you're sitting on the stoop in front of your house and you're like, his shoes are untied. I could say something, or this could be a valuable teachable moment.
Exactly. Yes, like, come on, do it. Search your feelings. You know it to be true. The last note that I just had was that I thought it was kind of cool that the dungeons had mini bosses.
Yeah, I did too. And I got a lot calmer about it once I realized it seems like because they do the little teleporty thing when you beat the mini boss, and it seems like they also, within some reasonable distance of the mini boss, there's like a room of loot, and loot in Zelda games is not rupees, it's hearts, right? So like this game does what all the 2D Zeldas do, which I hate, and I really wish they would explain themselves, but like when you load your save file, you only have 3 hearts. Doesn't matter if you have 50 hearts, you have 3 hearts when you load, right? So if you do what I did and you're like, oh man, kind of struggling with this boss, I'm going to take a break, right? And then I will come back and and then just jump on the teleporter, walk 2 or 3 rooms over, and then bing, bang, boom, final boss. And I did that, and I was like, I only have 3 hearts. And then I was like kind of because again, the dungeon map isn't super useful. Granted, it's about the same as every other 2D Zelda dungeon map, but it's not.
Yeah, they're all garbage.
Yeah, it's not super useful. So I was like kind of poking around, and I found like the room of pots, and like there's a lot of pots, and you smash them and you get hearts, right? So I was like, oh, okay, so this is, instead of them just making your goddamn save file load with full health for some insufferable reason, they just want you to always have to build back up. Maybe it's because they don't want you to save scum. Like they don't want you to save, reboot your Game Boy and then be like, oh, I have full health, I guess. But I think it's way more likely it's just an artifact of history. But anyway, they solved it through like world design, where it's like, okay, if you poke around, you will find a room full of pots or a room full of easy to kill bats or something, and you'll be able to grind for health, which is again like a very Mega Man Capcom thing. Like, yeah, okay, fine, there's a hard boss, and if you go look over there's a bunch of like infinitely spawning enemies that you can shoot, and you can fill your E-tanks and you'll be fine.
Yes. Co-sign all that. That's pretty much all I got. You got anything else you want to hit?
There were 2 things. One I wanted to ask you about, and one I just like, I don't know, maybe you can enlighten me. So the platforming.
Doubtful, but continue.
There's platforming. This is not the enlightening one. This is just a funny thing I noticed. There, every dungeon has like at least a small 2D segment, and some of them have like fairly substantial 2D segments. Link's Awakening also had some like pretty substantial platforming segments. These games made by Capcom makes Mega Man, and they restrained themselves. They waited all the way until I think the 4th dungeon, but in the 4th dungeon, there's a section where you do platforming on the alternating blocks where some appear and then and dude, I could hear, they're even kind of the right shade of blue. I could hear the Iceman stage from Mega Man 1, the noise that those friggin' blocks make when they go boo, boo, boo. Like, I damn near dropped the console laughing. I was just like, oh my God. Someone at Capcom was just like, hey guys, I'm going to put that puzzle from Mega Man 1 in here. It's going to be so cool. And it's not cool because the platforming is not very tight. So most of the platforming segments are, I think, a fun visual and mechanical break. and they're perfectly pleasant. But anytime they ask you to do precision platforming, it falls flat, in my opinion, just totally flat.
No, I concur with that. And actually, that makes me think of what I think probably more likely happened is something that I have done as a DM in D&D, and I'm convinced everybody does, which is that, it's like, all right, man, like, hey, you're in this town, there's thing A, thing B, thing C, thing D, like whatever you want to do. And they're like, all right, we're going to do thing A, thing B, and thing D. And you're like, but thing C, no, man, like that. I don't even know what thing C is. I'm not interested in all. It's like, okay, all right, that's cool. There's like a whole chunk of adventure that you wrote that they just don't engage with. And all of a sudden it's like a side quest, that just nobody does. Right. And so then, next town, you're like, all right, so now there's thing A, thing B, thing C. That's the same thing C as before, just reskinned. And yeah, because I've lifted whole side chunks out that like nobody experienced. I'm like, yeah, okay, but they're in an underwater city now, so they're all merfolk, but it's exactly the same. And like now it's Mer Daniel and Mer Patricia that need your help. I say all that.
If you wrote an entire world knowing full well your players were only going to see a fraction of it, and you just let all that stuff die on the vine and then wrote entirely new things every time you like if every time you needed to eat a slice of pie you invented another universe, that would be insane. You would go mad.
Oh, absolutely. And the nice thing is, because I've DM'd many different people, is I'll occasionally be like, okay, for example, like if I wrote something for you, I'd be like, oh man, I need a quick one-off side quest. I don't know, what's something I wrote for Lions that these people haven't experienced yet? I say all that to say that that's certainly what somebody did, is that they were, it was the 11th hour, they were a day late and $1 short, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to take this stuff we did in Iceman stage, we're going to reskin it and we're going to toss it into Zelda. It'll be fine. Narrator, but it was not fine because this is not made for that,
And I mean, they could have, right? They could have spaced the blocks out differently. They could have had fewer blocks. The problem I was having was I was colliding with some of the blocks because your jumps aren't very tight. And then you smack into a block because you jumped further than you meant to. And it's just, the platforming conceptually and in general, I was like, oh, I like this. Like, it is a fun little inclusion. It's a little evolution on the 2D segments from Zelda 1. Like, this is nice. But anytime they were like, okay, now do something challenging, I was like, you didn't build a game engine for that.
Yep.
Granted, it's tiny little segments. They're infrequent, but you crash into those walls. Like, you hit them hard.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's like platforming in a first person shooter where, when they say like, all right, now just jump from here to here to here. And you just go, okay, this is bad though, right? That, like, and actually in Borderlands, one of the Borderlands expansions, they actually have like a platforming section in Tiny Tina's Adventure. And it's funny because like you do it, and if you fail it twice, Tina, who's the DM in this case, comes on and she goes like, yeah, the games really aren't made for this. And then solves the problem for you.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, which is amazing, right? Because I just feel like that's very tongue in cheek, right? So it just would have been nice if they were like, hey, do this platforming. Nah, super psych. You don't need to do that.
No, we're not going to do it. So here's the thing that I want to know if you could enlighten me on, because I was kind of racking my brain, and for some reason I just couldn't like assemble a coherent answer to this. There are in this game a lot of people who just shove random garbage into your inventory, and then somewhere in the world is a different people who wants that thing, and in return for your generosity gives you some. So it's like at the end of the game, you've bought a house, but the first thing anybody shoved into your inventory was a paperclip. So like you just keep trading your way up to like more and more important things to saving the world. And
the infinite recursive fetch quests.
Yes. Right. Because you must do these exact steps in this exact order. And granted, there are lots of gates along the way to make sure like you can't get 95% of the way through the game. And they're like, oh, you didn't start the infinite fetch quest, because you need infinite fetch quest items along the way to proceed. I don't remember the other 2D Zeldas having this be such a core part of how you move through the world, where it's like so video gamey, I guess. Like, it was just very weird to me. The first couple items that you get just feel like, hey, you're going to need this later. It's like, but this is random garbage. And it's like, no, trust me. someone's going to need this random garbage, but that's not how it's presented mechanically. That is what's happening. But in universe, it's just like, hey, carry this bag of dirt. It's like, why would I do that? And it's like, doesn't matter. It's in your inventory now. And then eventually you will talk to some NPC who's like, a bag of dirt, just what I needed. Here's a single tongue depressor. And you're like, what am I going to do with this? It doesn't matter. It's in your inventory now. And like, it felt, that was the like clunkiest, like it never stopped me because it's always super obvious, right? Someone's like, I have a cold. I wish there was some spicy soup I could eat. Like it's always really obvious what MacGuffin each person in the fetch quest chain needs. And the person who gives it to you says something soup, like their entire personality is like, I make spicy soup. Right. So like, it's
their entire personality. Like, Jesus, John, get a new hobby.
Get any hobby.
This is terrible. But this is why Mary left you.
It just felt like, I don't know, hackneyed, like poorly executed. Like it never derailed me. It didn't slow me down. It didn't really cause any problems. It just felt like everything, the visuals are so polished. The music is so polished. The puzzles are pretty well thought out. Like the combat is really solid. What is with the infinite fetch quest of awkwardness? Like, does every 2D Zelda game do that? And I just never noticed because they do it like more subtly.
I don't remember A Link to the Past doing it, or at least I can't. The problem with Link to the Past, I played that one so many times, is that if they had it, it might not even register.
Which is exactly how I framed the note in my notes. Was like, oh, maybe I've just become blind to this.
Right. If I remember correctly, there was something similar in like the first one, the original Legend of Zelda. In order to get a couple of items, you had to like stack them, but it was more like, oh, I've gotten, the red candle, which, then I can then use to go to as a tool to go get the blue candle. Not like I'm just trading it to somebody. It's not useless garbage in my inventory. Quick other aside, one of the fun things in D&D, or at least a rule that I've always established, is that cursed items you just can't take off, So one of the things that would always happen in my adventures is somebody be like, all right, magical item, no, I put it on. Okay. Can I take it off? No. I say that to say, it's like, here's a bag of dirt. And you're just like, okay, I don't want this. Why can't I get this out of my inventory? It's like,
it's a cursed bag of dirt.
I put it in my inventory. Okay. Can I take it out of my inventory? No.
Can I equip it and use it? No. It just takes up a special space over here on the second screen.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Yeah. The answer is don't think about it, Morty. I will say, though, that where I first for sure noticed it is in Ocarina of Time. And it is the way you get the Bigoron sword is through the infinite fetch quest of weirdness, which is exactly, I actually had a note about it, and I marked it off because I'm like, I don't know if this is just like my hot button thing, but yeah, is that when I saw that and I was like, yeah, but, and again, like I said, like that is to me when it started, and that they probably did it there and they were like, hey, this was kind of cool. But then I agree with you that I felt that they made it too integral here, so as opposed to before, it was like, you can either get the fake Bigoron sword, which breaks after 100 uses or whatever, right? Or you can get the awesome one, but the awesome one, you got to do a bunch of weird discordant stuff, right?
Well, and that optional, right?
Optional, right? But then it's like, no, do a bunch of weird discordant stuff that's necessary. You're like, okay, well, there's a big difference between reading a book for fun and reading a book for class.
Yeah. And I think the one change I would have had them make is let me have 2 or 3 cursed bags of dirt at a time. So it's because as far as I could tell, maybe it was just weird luck, but you have a spot in your inventory for your cursed item, right?
Yeah.
And so you're always just trading up that paperclip trying to get to that house. And like, I get it. Like, oh, this is incentive to talk to NPCs. It's incentive to like be an active participant in the world and like understand the relationships people have to the world and to each other. I'm all for that, but it might be nice to leave a little bit of the problem solving to the player, where it's like, oh, I have this item And then I talked to this other person, and they didn't want my cursed bag of dirt. They just shoved the cursed tongue depressor onto me. And then I talked to this fifth person, right? I talked to two more people in between, and they didn't say anything about the dirt or the tongue depressor. But then this fifth person, they wanted the dirt. And then they gave me something else, right? Or they just take the dirt, but they don't give you anything. But mechanically, like in the code, now that I've given them the dirt, they go do something off camera that makes it even possible to get the other thing. But you just literally swap item for item for item. And it just, I don't like, it's not game breaking. It's not even disruptive because people just do it automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just talk to people and they do the trading for you, which is why it feels so like awkwardly video gamey. It's like this gating mechanic that is like on full display. Like It's not a door with a key. It's mechanically a door with a key, but like they're trying to pretend it's not a door with a key. It's just, it's maybe the clunkiest part of the entire game, which is, considering it is totally inoffensive and it's just awkward, is still pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, other games do things that are similar that I also find, in my opinion, distasteful. And actually, we discussed this a little bit for Nier Automata, which is that like, where it's like, man, you can craft whatever you want, except that except that if you want to craft, if you want to craft any useful item, you need 5 wood, 3 iron, and then 1 MacGuffin unit. And it's like, and we're only going to give you a MacGuffin unit when you get to this point in the story. It's like, then don't even make it available to me. This is not craftable, like.
Then when I get to that point in the story, just give me the item.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because by that time I'll have 99 wood, 99 ore, and so that currency is deflated and meaningless. Yeah, so that type, you see different flavors of that type of thing all over the place, where they're like, they want it to feel like, oh man, through your own cunning and wit, you managed to do this thing. But and honestly, to some people with perhaps lower game literacy, were like, this is maybe one of the first games they're playing, it may still feel that way. But when you played enough of them and it's like, oh my gosh, like, look at all this stuff I can craft. It's like, yeah, but kinda, like, oh wow, look at this cool item puzzle I found out. Yeah, well, kinda, like that's not, but that's not what we're there for. But
this is the other edge of that Master Sword, right? The one edge of the Master Sword is like, our taste in narrative has matured to the point where we're less cynical assholes, but also like when a mechanic is even just the tiniest bit dull, you're just like, huh. Right?
Yeah,
we need to temper that.
It's getting the bullet bill in 8th place in Mario Kart. You're like, oh my gosh, what a surprise. I wonder if that rubber band could be even more taut.
You have Mario Kart 8 for your Switch, yeah?
I do not.
Okay, so find someone who does. Like, even if you have to fly out here and we can play it together, there's one of the racetracks is like the baby loop, where it's literally like the stereotypical like oval shape, and it's super short. So they make you do like 8 laps of it. Mm-hmm. And in the latest version of the patch for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can choose which items come out of item boxes. And playing that track with only bullet bills is really chaotic. Like, it's totally stupid. You only do it once, but it is a very funny couple of minutes where just everyone is just firing bullet bills nonstop. And if you miss, like if you take a turn too sharp or somebody cuts you off and they get the item box and you don't, you feel terrified and tiny and helpless as all of these bullet bills are just flying around.
Hey, don't kill me. Don't kill me. No, that sounds amazing. And 2, not to get too far afield, but I was talking to somebody recently and they were playing Mario Kart and they're like, oh man, you should play it. And I was like, yeah, I can't get around the rubber band physics, and they're like, yeah, I could see that with like, especially with Mario Kart 64, something like that. But this one's better. And I was just like, I don't know what to say now. Sure.
Yeah, like, no, the right thing to say is nothing, because you just met a grown ass man who still genuinely believes in Santa Claus. and it's just like, I am surprised, but you seem so happy. Like, if you really believe Mario Kart 8 doesn't have rubber band physics, who am I to destroy your childlike wonder?
Or that the rubber band physics are getting less intense,
Yeah. No, dude, the latest version of Mario Party doesn't just give out random stars.
Yeah, that doesn't happen at all. It's like, I think it, you know what? You look like you're having a good time. Yeah, sure.
yeah. Sure, champ.
What do you think, man? Did it hold up?
It totally held up. And we are in a delightful coincidence point where I think we've had some listener requests for more of the expanded Zelda universe. You said you wanted to play this game because you hadn't played it. I had, turned my nose up at the handheld Zeldas. And then literally just last week, Nintendo announced that they're bringing Game Boy games to Nintendo Switch Online, and this game is going to be among them. So we're getting like delightful free coincidence advertising. But yeah, it's a good top-down Zelda game. Like, it's just, if you like Link to the Past, if you liked Link's Awakening, especially, like, personally, I think this is headed in a better direction from where Link's Awakening had some like weird rough edges because it was their first portable outing. I can see no reason not to play this if you like 2D top-down Zelda, right? If your first Zelda game was Ocarina or Twilight Princess or Breath of the Wild, right? A 3D one, this would probably seem almost childishly provincial, but the music's great, the art style is adorable, and you can play it on modern hardware without having to, do anything sketchy or unsavory. I can't see a good reason not to put, the 8 to 12 hours into this, because it's just nice. Like, it is not only is it not a grand, you have to save the multiverse from being, eaten and farted out by Ganon, but it's also like the mechanics are all approachable. The combat is all approachable. The puzzles are all approachable. Like, the whole game just feels like a nice Zelda adventure, which seems to be what they consistently have been doing with the portable ones. Like, if this trend line continues, portable Zeldas are more like, what if Link to the Past, but more, and then the 3D Zeldas, like, they continue to raise the stakes and they got more serious and they got more complicated. But the portable Zeldas are just like, I don't know, man, I just want to play Link to the Past, but I'm not at my couch with my television. So it's great. Highly, highly recommended if you enjoy the top-down Zeldas, which if you don't, that is sad for you.
I don't think you said the words, man.
No nostalgia goggles required. I didn't. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, oh, she's going to call me out, isn't he? And you did. And you were right to do so. So thank you for keeping me honest.
No problem. So full nostalgia goggles from my seat. No.
Burn it all down.
Yeah, a terrible game. Basically chaotic evil, both broken and unfun to play. No, dude. I mean, no. The game's a blast. No nostalgia goggles required. Yeah, I agree with you that one of the, and we said a number of times, that one of the things this game does, I think, very well is it doesn't have to be, season 7 of Doctor Who, where, the entire world's at stake, or I don't know, whatever season that is, where, it's like, it's the Omni Super Multiverse. And you're like, oh my God, goodness. Can we just just blowing up the Earth is fine. Like, I can wrap my noggin around that.
You could even just screw around with Britain. I'll believe that's important. Like it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's like a weird, city or something. I don't know. I don't really know much about that. I'm from America. And our school systems are beyond reproach. Anyways, I say all of that to say that, again, the game's fun. It does a lot of interesting things. It does some things that could maybe use to be improved on, but 90% of it is genuinely fun and interesting and fascinating to kind of go through. So, out of the chain of Legend of Zelda games, this is a good Link.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how save the day. Then on all the experience gained, at the end of it all, gamers play what we play. Not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is saved, but who cares? We both know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is saved. So you're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the
I can't believe that joke survived until now.